There comes a moment in the life of the soul when we realize that all the asking, all the pleading, all the striving to convince the infinite to provide is unnecessary, for God does not withhold, God does not need to be persuaded. The asking is born out of our human sense of lack, a sense that something is missing, a need that must be fulfilled, and yet the truth is far simpler and far more beautiful. Everything we seek is already here, already present in the eternal flow of divine life. When we stop asking, we create a space within ourselves where the infinite can enter unimpeded. Asking is effort, tension, and movement outward. Receiving, on the other hand, is stillness, openness, and inward attention. In that silence, we discover that the supply we have been seeking externally has been within us all along. Receiving is not a matter of hope, it is a matter of knowing. It is the recognition that God's presence is not something to be earned or begged for. It is always here. When you stop asking, you shift from wanting to being, from striving to trusting, from expectation to experience. In that subtle shift, the impossible becomes natural, the delayed becomes immediate, and the unseen manifests effortlessly. To receive, we must let go of control. We must surrender our ideas of how things should happen, and when they should happen. Divine life moves in its own perfect rhythm. When we release our grasp, we align ourselves with that rhythm, allowing life to unfold in ways far beyond our imagination. And as we open ourselves to this divine flow, transformation occurs, not just around us, but within us. Anxiety and worry give way to peace. Confusion dissolves into clarity. Opportunities appear, not because we chase them, but because we are aligned with the source from which all good flows. Receiving becomes a natural state, a quiet confidence, a continuous awareness that the divine is already at work, already providing, already fulfilling every need. So stop asking, stop striving, stop convincing. Instead, breathe, be still, and open yourself. Receive the life that is already yours, the love that is already present, and the divine guidance that is always at hand. In this sacred openness, you will discover that the act of receiving is not just about fulfillment, it is about transformation. You become, in your very being, a channel of divine abundance, a living reflection of the God that has been with you all along. 1. When we speak of moving from asking to receiving, we are talking about a profound shift in consciousness, a transformation that begins not in the world around us, but in the inner life of the soul. Asking is the natural habit of the human mind when it senses lack, when it believes that something is missing or that fulfillment must be sought outside of itself. In asking, there is effort, strain, and a subtle tension, a sense that the universe must be persuaded to provide, that blessings are conditional upon our persistence or our cleverness. Asking is born out of separation, the belief that we are apart from the infinite, that the divine is distant and must be convinced through our petitions, prayers, or desires. It is a mode of thinking that keeps the mind active and restless, continually projecting into the future, focusing on what is absent rather than what is already present. Receiving, on the other hand, is an entirely different state. It is not an action of the will but a condition of awareness. To receive is to enter into the quiet recognition that the infinite presence, the divine source, is already fully available and complete. It is the release of striving and the cessation of effort, the letting go of the inner tension that arises when we feel the need to control or to secure outcomes. In the act of receiving, there is surrender, not as a sign of weakness, but as an acknowledgement of truth. We realize that asking is unnecessary because everything we have ever sought is already flowing within the depths of our own being. The transition from asking to receiving requires attentiveness, a gentle mindfulness of the present moment, and a willingness to quiet the inner dialogue that constantly petitions and negotiates with life. It is a subtle art of turning inward, of lifting awareness from the external world of conditions and circumstances into the silent, inexhaustible wellspring of divine life that exists in the present. Receiving is a natural outcome of alignment. It occurs when the heart and mind are open, when doubt and worry dissolve, and when trust replaces effort. In this state, life no longer feels like a task or a struggle, but becomes an experience of flow, a harmonious unfolding of reality where divine abundance enters effortlessly. Thus, moving from asking to receiving is not merely a change in behavior, it is a shift in perception, a subtle but transformative recognition that the divine does not wait for our requests. It is already here, already active, already giving. In this state, the soul rests, and the infinite supply that we have been seeking outside ourselves is discovered within, complete, whole, and ever present. 2. Often we live with the assumption that what we need, peace, guidance, provision, healing, or inspiration, must be found outside of ourselves in circumstances, people, or events. We search, we strive, we plan, and we ask, believing that fulfillment is a distant goal to be earned or attained. Yet the truth is far simpler and infinitely more comforting. God's supply is already here. It has always been present, fully complete, waiting only for our awareness to meet it. The divine is not a future reward or a distant resource. It is a living, omnipresent reality flowing through every moment, constantly offering all that is needed for life, growth, and fulfillment. When we grasp this, our perception of lack begins to dissolve, and we begin to understand that scarcity is an illusion born of distraction and misalignment. Recognizing that God's supply is already here requires a turning inward, an attentiveness to the still, silent presence that underlies all experience. It requires letting go of the habitual belief that we must chase, beg, or strive, and instead opening our consciousness to what is always available. The supply is not conditional upon merit, timing, or effort. It is intrinsic, abundant, and immediate. It is like the sun that shines even when clouds obscure our vision, like water flowing beneath the surface, unseen but continuously nourishing life. When we attune ourselves to this inner reality, we begin to realize that everything we have ever sought externally has been flowing within us all along, patiently waiting for our awareness to align with it. This understanding transforms the way we live. It shifts our focus from anxiety about lack to appreciation of presence, from effortful striving to effortless alignment. Life becomes less about accumulation and more about recognition, less about pursuit and more about conscious reception. The moment we accept that God's supply is already here, we cease to chase outcomes, and we begin to notice that circumstances, relationships, and opportunities naturally harmonize with this inner reality. Moreover, the recognition of this constant supply fosters peace, trust, and a deep inner satisfaction. It frees the mind from worry, the heart from fear, and the soul from restless striving. In this state of awareness, we no longer need to ask desperately or wait anxiously because the infinite source is flowing, perfectly timed and fully adequate. The only requirement is our willingness to pause, to quiet the mind, and to open ourselves to the presence that has never left. Receiving, then, becomes not a distant goal but a natural experience of life itself, a conscious alignment with the fullness that is already here. 3. Stillness is not merely the absence of activity, it is a profound inner posture of receptivity, a quieting of the mind that allows the unseen currents of life to flow freely into our consciousness. In the human experience, we often associate action with results, movement with progress, and noise with vitality. Yet the spiritual truth is the opposite. It is in stillness that we come into alignment with the infinite, where the divine presence is most clearly recognized, and where true receiving begins. Asking, striving, and seeking are all forms of outward movement that carry a subtle tension, a suggestion that the divine must be persuaded or coaxed into response. Stillness, however, is a recognition that the response is already complete, that the supply is always present, and that the only requirement is our willingness to quiet the mind and open the heart. When the mind is calm, the internal dialogue of fear, doubt, and expectation dissolves. In this quiet, the soul becomes sensitive to the gentle whisper of divine guidance. We begin to notice that life is not a series of random events, but a continuous unfolding of grace, perfectly orchestrated beyond our comprehension. Stillness allows us to release control, to stop projecting our limited ideas of timing and method onto the vast intelligence of God. It is in this space that miracles of insight, clarity, and provision emerge naturally, not as a result of effort, but as the natural consequence of alignment. The power of inner stillness lies in its ability to transform perception. In stillness, we begin to see that what we have been seeking externally, the solution, the peace, the understanding, is already present within us. The outer world is a reflection of the inner state. When the mind is restless, circumstances appear chaotic, but when the mind is quiet and receptive, life begins to harmonize effortlessly. Stillness opens the doorway to trust, allowing the soul to rest in the certainty that the divine is always at work. It is a practice of surrendering the constant need to ask, plan or fix, and instead embracing the assurance that life flows perfectly in its own time and manner. Moreover, inner stillness nurtures a sense of connection that goes beyond the intellect or emotion. It is an experiential awareness, a living knowledge that the divine presence is not a distant abstraction, but a reality fully accessible in every moment. In this silence, we discover that receiving is not an act of accumulation, but a natural state of being. It is in stillness that the heart opens fully, the mind becomes clear, and the flow of divine abundance enters effortlessly, bringing peace, joy, and a profound sense of wholeness. For faith, in its truest sense, is not a hope or a wish cast into the future. It is not the anxious longing for something that may or may not happen. Faith is the quiet, unwavering recognition that the infinite is already present and fully active in every moment of our lives. When we live in hope, we are projecting our desires into a future that feels uncertain, placing our trust in outcomes that lie beyond our control. But faith as knowing transcends time and circumstance. It is the deep awareness that what we seek is not distant, hidden, or conditional. It is already here, already given, already flowing. To know in this way is to align the mind and heart with the eternal presence that underlies all life. And in that alignment, the act of receiving becomes effortless. Knowing is an experiential awareness. It arises not from intellectual argument or persuasion, but from direct contact with the reality of the divine within. When we stop hoping and begin knowing, our consciousness shifts from a state of lack to a state of fullness. There is no longer a sense of needing to negotiate with the universe or convince the infinite to act in our favor. Instead, we rest in the certainty that the infinite has already provided, that the supply is unbroken and complete, and that life is unfolding perfectly, even if our human perspective does not immediately recognize it. Faith as knowing transforms our inner life profoundly. Doubt and fear, which arise from hoping and uncertainty, begin to dissolve. The mind becomes calm, the heart opens, and the soul rests in a peaceful confidence that does not depend on external conditions. This form of faith is not passive, it is dynamic, living, and active in the quietest sense. It aligns us with the source of all good, and in that alignment, the flow of divine abundance naturally expresses itself in our thoughts, words, and actions. Life begins to respond, not because we have demanded or pleaded, but because we have entered into the natural harmony of the infinite. Furthermore, knowing cultivates a deeper sense of trust in the unfolding of life. We learn to release control, to stop directing the how, when, and to allow the divine intelligence to orchestrate perfect outcomes. In this state, receiving becomes a natural consequence, not a distant goal. Our awareness opens, our perception sharpens, and we see that the infinite is always working, always providing, always fulfilling every need. Faith as knowing is the doorway through which divine abundance flows freely, bringing peace, clarity, and a profound inner assurance that life is exactly as it should be. 5. Releasing control is one of the most challenging yet transformative steps in the spiritual journey. As human beings, we are conditioned to believe that life responds to our planning, our strategies, and our constant effort to shape circumstances according to our will. We hold tightly to outcomes, to timelines, to the how and the when of life, thinking that our security depends on our ability to manage and direct every detail. Yet the truth of divine life is that control is an illusion, a subtle insistence that we must dictate what is already being perfectly orchestrated by the infinite. When we release control, we step out of the tension of trying to manipulate life and into the freedom of trusting the flow of divine intelligence. Releasing control does not mean passivity or indifference. It is not an abandonment of action or responsibility. Rather, it is an inner surrender, a conscious recognition that the infinite is present, fully capable, and already active in every situation. It is the understanding that life unfolds in perfect timing, often beyond what the human mind can conceive. By letting go of our grip, we allow the unseen forces of divine wisdom to move freely, arranging circumstances, relationships, and opportunities in ways that surpass our limited imagination. In this surrender, the energy once spent on worry, doubt, and striving is redirected into openness, receptivity, and clarity, and the soul becomes a conduit for the seamless flow of life. When control is released, we begin to notice a remarkable shift. Anxiety diminishes because we are no longer attempting to force outcomes. Frustration fades because we are no longer resisting the natural unfolding of events. Life begins to reveal its intelligence, showing us that what we thought we needed to orchestrate with effort was already in motion, perfectly aligned with divine order. In this state, receiving becomes effortless. The answers, solutions, and opportunities we have longed for do not arrive as a result of our pushing. They emerge naturally as a reflection of the harmony we have entered within ourselves. Releasing control also deepens our trust in the infinite. As we observe the gentle unfolding of life, when we step back, we gain confidence in the wisdom and perfection of the source that guides all things. We begin to understand that control is not required because life is already moving toward the good, the harmonious, and the complete. In surrender, we align with this truth. We no longer chase, worry, or cling, but we receive. We receive the blessings, guidance, and opportunities that were always ours, and in doing so, we discover that the act of letting go is itself the key that unlocks the door to divine abundance, peace, and fulfillment. 6. Transformation in being is the natural outcome of moving from asking to receiving, from striving to surrender, from doubt to knowing. It is not a change that comes through effort or external achievement, but a subtle shift in consciousness that begins deep within the soul. When we stop asking and start receiving, we are no longer defined by lack or limitation. The mind, once restless with worry and desire, becomes calm. The heart, once burdened with fear and uncertainty, becomes open, and the entire being begins to resonate with a profound sense of peace, clarity, and alignment with the infinite presence that permeates all life. This transformation is both internal and external. Internally, we notice that thoughts of scarcity, anxiety, or striving lose their power over us. We are no longer caught in the endless cycle of wishing, questioning, and seeking validation from circumstances. Instead, we begin to live from a place of fullness, recognizing that everything we need, wisdom, guidance, provision, and love, is already present within us. This inner alignment affects how we perceive the world around us. Situations that once seemed confusing or insurmountable now appear as opportunities for grace. Challenges become lessons in trust rather than sources of fear. The outer world reflects the inner shift because reality always mirrors the consciousness within. Receiving from the divine also transforms our actions and decisions. We act not out of urgency, compulsion, or anxiety, but out of clarity and confidence. We make choices that are inspired rather than reactive, guided by an inner sense of wisdom that is always in harmony with the greater flow of life. Our interactions with others become infused with patience, understanding, and compassion as we recognize that the same divine presence is at work in every life we touch. In this way, transformation in being is not simply personal, it radiates outward, influencing the environment and relationships around us. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this transformation is its effortless nature. It is not achieved through struggle, discipline, or performance. It comes simply from aligning with the reality of the infinite, from opening ourselves fully to receive rather than chase, from trusting that what we need has always been present. As we embody this truth, life itself becomes a continuous experience of grace. We no longer measure fulfillment by external achievements, but by the steady, abiding awareness of our connection with the divine. Receiving transforms us from within, creating a state of being in which peace, joy, clarity, and abundance are not distant goals, but the natural expression of our aligned consciousness. As we step back and reflect on the journey from asking to receiving, a beautiful truth emerges. Life is never about striving, convincing, or chasing. It is about awakening to the presence that has always been within us, the supply that has never left, and the wisdom that quietly guides every moment. When we stop asking and start receiving, we enter into a state of harmony with the infinite, a space where peace replaces anxiety, clarity replaces confusion, and the flow of divine life moves naturally through our being. We realize that asking is a habit born of separation, of perceiving lack where there is none. Receiving, in contrast, is a recognition, a surrender, a quiet knowing that all that we seek is already given. By becoming still, releasing control, and aligning our consciousness with the eternal presence, we open ourselves fully to the transformative power of the divine. In this state, faith is no longer hoping, it is knowing. It is the intimate awareness that life is orchestrated with perfect wisdom, and that we need only to be present, receptive, and willing. This transformation touches every aspect of our being. The mind grows calm, the heart opens, and the soul vibrates with the steady awareness of abundance and grace. Our actions, relationships, and choices naturally reflect this alignment, and the world around us begins to mirror the peace and clarity we have discovered within. Life becomes effortless, not because struggle has ended, but because we have learned to move in concert with the infinite, trusting the flow rather than resisting it. So, the true power lies not in asking, but in receiving, not in striving, but in being, not in control, but in surrender. When we embrace this path, we discover that the divine is not a distant source to persuade or a future prize to earn. It is an ever-present reality, flowing through every breath, every thought, and every moment. And in that awareness we are transformed, we are renewed. We are fully alive, resting in the certainty that everything we need has always been, and always will be, perfectly available.